Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about evidence of evolution by natural selection. The evidence supporting evolution is the fossil record, which is a transition species, anatomical records, which gives us homologous and vestigial structures, embryology and development, the molecular record, which is proteins and DNA sequence, and then artificial selection, so human-caused evolution. So the fossil record. What does the fossil record tell us about an organism? It tells us the looks, the size, the shape, etc., where or how they lived, what other organisms lived at the same time. So the fossil record gives us layers of sedimentary rock that contains fossils. Now, the thing about fossils is they're really hard to get because they have to be in a very specific area, protected from the harsh environment, that's outside, because regular wind and other forms of eroding will get rid of bone and strip it bare really quickly. And it needs to be able to be where some new layers of rock can cover over it quickly and creating pressure that would create the fossil. So it's really hard to get fossils, and so when we find them, it's always interesting to see where it can fit in the fossil record. So new layers cover older ones, creating a record over time. And fossils within the layers will show a succession of organisms that have populated the earth throughout a long period of time. So here we see a fossil. We see lots of different fossils, for example. You can see fossils that are stuck in amber, as shown right here with the scorpion. Here's some fossil of some leaves, fossilized wood, a skull, so on and so forth. And we find all of this within the record. It also shows us that today's species are descended from an ancestral species. So here we are seeing an African elephant, and that it is closely related to the Asian elephant, which both of them are related to the mammoth via a common ancestor. And this common ancestor, there was a split between the common ancestor and then what creates these two animals. We can see the evolutionary change in horses. If we look right over here, we see that there's this animal right here that Hyracanthrium had four, it didn't have a fused metatarsals and tarsals. And if we look at its tooth, the tooth didn't have the edges that our modern horse has. So as time progressed and we had splits within our species where we got newer animals in their fossil record, there was change in adaptations that made it to where the tarsals and metatarsals fused and created one leg, one large bone, and the phalanges forming, being very small. And if you look at the horse, it walks unguligrade, which means it essentially walks on its nails. So right here, this tarsal bone, and then it has the nail that surrounds it. Where over here, they were walking on capuligrade, which means they had to walk on their toes. Archaeopteryx lived about 150 million years ago. This links reptiles and birds. This is what we know as the first bird currently. We're trying to see if there is a farther back, but this is the first one we found. Now this one right here, you can see that it has feathers in its, we can see feathers in the fossil, and we see that the head is bent like this in the fossil record due to the fact that the bird has a tendon that would keep its neck straight, and so when it dies, that tendon will like loosen or something, which would allow the neck to go like that. So from the computer analysis, we see that it was a skillful flyer, We currently believe that they were really good at gliding. But we can also see that they could fly with their wings. Their wingspan was about 19.6 inches and they weighed about 12 ounces. So where are the transitional fossils? So here, this is we know that whales actually came from a land mammal. Whales, porpoises, and our orcas. So where are our transitional fossils? Well, here's some of them right here. You can look right here and you can see that when we look at the legs are designed, or how they're portioned on here, they're designed really well for cupping and moving the water out of the way. So here we have our land mammal, and then we have Pakicetus, which is still mostly land, and then Ambulocetus, which now we're getting this leg that seems to be good for moving the water, Delanistes, Rhodocetus, and so on and so forth, all the way back to the Mysticetes and Odontocetes, which are our current whales. So we have whales and then orcas and dolphins and other porpoises. So the early tetrapod, we have Tiktaalik. It is the missing link from sea to land. Now, our anatomical record, we see homologous structures. Now, this shows that we have a common ancestry. So human, you see that we have the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the carpal bones, and the phalanges. And we see that it's the same in humans, cats, whales, and bats. And when we look at it, when we look at all of them, we see that they each have the same amount of phalanges. The whale has lost maybe the thumb. And the carpal bones are all there with the radius and ulna. So homologous structures means that they have a similar structure, a similar development, different functions now, but it shows that they have an evidence of close evolutionary relationship. They have a recent common ancestor. So here, when it comes to plants, we have succulent leaves, colored leaves, needles, tendrils, and spines. Now, they are all a form of leaves, but they all have different jobs. So it is common ancestry in the fact that they're all leaves, but they have all now specialized and adapted to their environments. Analogous structures. These are separate evolution of structures. So they have a similar function. For example, the dragonfly and the bird and a bat, their function is to fly. They have a similar external form. Now, if we were to look at all of them, they all have a very similar form, but they have the different internal structure and development. A bird's wing is going to have those bones, and then from the rest of it, it's all feathers. It doesn't have anything connecting it, where a dragonfly's wings don't even have a bone there. They don't have bones. And then we look at a bat, and the bat's wing is actually a skin between the fingers, so between the phalanges of the bat. So they are very different in internal structure and development there. And they have a different evolutionary origin. A bird comes from reptiles or a bird comes from dinosaurs, where a bat comes from mammals. Like if we were to continue looking, the bat comes from the mammals line, and the dragonfly is on the insects. So it's a completely different origin. So there is no evolutionary relationship of when they got their wings. And it's interesting because we were using this as a way to classify in the very beginning when we were doing taxonomy. It was a way to classify, they thought to classify by structure. So like, oh look, these must be related because they all have wings. Well, later on, as we were using the different evidences of evolution, we saw that that actually wasn't what happened. And so it was a great way to help us figure out how taxonomy works, because sometimes you can use homologous structures to help you out, and you can use those structures, but when you get analogous structures, you have to really look at it. So vestigial organs, these are modern animals having structures that serve little to no function. They have remnants of structures that were functional in an ancestral species. We can have deleterious mutations in them and accumulate in genes for non-critical structures without reducing the fitness of that animal. So for example, if we had a deleterious mutation where our tailbone is, it's not going to be harmful to our fitness. We will still be able to reproduce and survive. It just, because the mutation is in an area that we don't use. Apologies. Snakes and whales have the remains of pelvic and leg bones from their walking ancestors, eyes on blind cavefish, and our human tailbone, of course. These are all vestigial organs. Comparative embryology, these are similar embryological developments in closely related species. All vertebrate embryos have similar structure at different stages of development. Gill pouch in fish, frogs, snakes, birds, and humans. And then they eventually turn into what they need to turn into. The molecular records, this is comparing DNA and protein structure. We have a universal genetic code of DNA and RNA, and we can compare common genes. So cytochrome C for respiration and hemoglobin for gas exchange. We can see how closely related species have sequences that are more. Looking at the comparative hemoglobin structure, we can look back and see that by comparing amino acid sequence, this can measure evolutionary relationships. So here with the macaw, the number of amino acids differences between hemoglobin in vertebrate species and that of animals. Between a human and a macaw, there's only 8. Human and a dog, there's 32. Human and a bird, there's 45. Human and a frog, there's 67. And humans and a lamprey, there's 125. And this is really big to know that, because our DNA is a record that gets passed down from generation to generation. So one mutation is going to be passed down to the next person. And if they have a mutation that's different than the mutation we gave them, both of those mutations will be passed down to the next generation. And that's what we can see there. An evolutionary timeline. So here we have Mysticetes and Odontocetes. These are our whales and our orcas, our whales, orcas, porpoises. And then going back from there, and we can see that eventually these guys share a common ancestor with the hippopotamus.